Hi everybody, it's Joe Cioffi here. It's Tuesday in a very chilly evening here in the Northeast. We got a lot of clouds, at least where I am, along coastal areas. We hardly had any sun today. Temperatures had a tough time getting much above the middle 40s. Did not have enough drying to get at least some partial sunshine. This time of year, if you shut the sun off, you really shut your daytime heating off and temperatures go nowhere. So now we're going to move ahead. There's a couple of things I want to touch on before that we get into the weather going forward. You know, I recognize that there's a whole lot of chatter out there with regards to Thanksgiving week and prospects for storms and so on and so forth. You know what, for now, and I've kind of said this already, and I'm going to say it again, I'm just not that bullish at the moment. That's not to say I might not become bullish, but at the moment, I'm just not there. Okay, I wanted to just start off with real fast the snow cover across North America, which continues to run at about a 10-year high. And you can see the extent of the snow cover. This was as of Monday, so this was as of yesterday, running right along the U.S. border. All of Canada is, except for a few odd spots here and there, all of Canada is under snow cover, and this has played a role in the fact that Canada's temperatures this fall are much colder than they were in the prior two autumns, where the snow cover and the rate of snow cover growth was pretty low. This snow cover is at a 10-year high, by the way. And when we look at last year, and just to show you the difference, I mean, it's really a large difference. And I'll bring up the other one so you can at least, you know, give an idea and look side by side to some degree. Let me make it just a little bit smaller. And you can see the side-by-side comparisons here from last year at this date, where, you know, much of southern Canada had no snow at all to this year, where it extends down south of the Canadian border. Now, this is just one factor, and it's not the only factor, and I'm sure if you look back at snow cover growth across North America, I bet you will find years where indeed you had rapid snow cover growth occur in Canada, but that did not necessarily translate to a colder than average winter in the east. I'm just kind of putting it out there as another, you know, sort of little piece of information and a little clue. And in hindsight, as we get deep into the winter, we'll know whether all of this has any real meaning or not. Now, we're going to take a look at the GFS here, and let me get this to interact so I can move it along for you. And I honestly think that next week it's going to be cold in the eastern part of the United States as a whole. But I wonder really if there's going to be enough room for anything to happen through the middle part of next week. We may have to wait beyond that for any kind of significant storm threat. And the pattern overall, you know, does not look especially bullish with regards to big storms moving across the United States. So if you take a look at what the GFS has to offer today, we've got this next cold front that's moving across the Midwest, and you can see that there's some snow. This is for tomorrow night. Low pressure east of Lake Huron with some showers extending southward into western Pennsylvania, eastern Ohio. Meanwhile, out in the west, another strong system comes inland, and it looks like some pretty hefty rains for the northern part of California. You can see that the GFS is a particularly impressive area of rain for that area, and some snow in the colder inland sections and in the elevated areas into eastern Washington and up through the northern Rockies, although the air out west is not as cold as what it was, say, a week or two ago, when we had more of a deep trough out in the western part of the United States and cold air was pinned west of the Rockies. So we seem to have lost that, which is understandable considering everything that's going on in the east with this pattern shift. So this front goes by. We get a shot of chilly air Thursday night, which modifies somewhat on Friday. We should have a good deal of sunshine here in the east on Friday. Meanwhile, low pressure moves into eastern Colorado, so it looks like there might be some snow and rain in the Rockies, in the central and northern Rockies, nothing big. But that low comes out and heads towards the Great Lakes on Saturday and becomes a pretty impressive little low as it moves up into the eastern lakes. There'll be a trailing cold front from there south and west, and I wouldn't be surprised to see some thunderstorms develop ahead of that front as it swings across the Ohio Valley, and then it swings across the northeast, and in comes some colder air behind it. But one of the things the models have been trending now is that this upper air storm that was shown to develop here for the weekend and into early next week looks less developed, and then there's another system behind it that will take its place later next week that looks a bit more developed. And as a result, I think there'll be a second shot of cold air, a more important shot of cold air coming in for Wednesday and Thanksgiving Day. And if it plays out according to plan, Thanksgiving Day, I think, is looking especially cold, and it might actually be rather windy here Wednesday into Thursday. You can see this big high coming down and spreading in some very cold air for later Wednesday and Thursday and lasting into Friday. Notice now models, the GFS at least, loses any kind of storm development here, and you have to really go out later in the period, which I'm not even going to bother to do because it's just an exercise in futility as far as I'm concerned. But let's look at the upper air, because that really is going to tell the tale here as far as what's going on. And let's get back to the beginning so we can get a little continuity. We'll start at today and move forward. You can see that first trough with a cold front here on Thursday goes out, and you get a wrapped up little upper low that moves into the Canadian Maritimes. Here comes that second one, and again, the GFS actually has a much more developed look to this than the European does. But you can see there's a system right behind it that comes in for Tuesday, Wednesday, but there really is no room for any kind of coastal low to develop, at least from the way it looks to me. And then you have, that block up to the north. You can very clearly, this upper high that's sitting up over Greenland and moves across the top there, just shoves the overall jet stream way to the south and keeps it there all through Thanksgiving week. There's another arm that sort of rotates around and then starts to pull it out, and then you start to get another upper air low that replaces it. So when you have this blocking pattern that is up there, it really is going to force the jet stream to the south and keep it there. That, I think, is a constant no matter which model you look at. The European has a bit of a different outlook in terms of how it plays out, and it's a scenario that would have to be careful with in the longer term if it plays. I'm not buying this either at this point, because the models have just this model has changed too much over the last several days for me to gain any kind of confidence and consistency. But you can see this trough swinging in the east for Thursday, just like the GFS. But here's the one for Saturday, Sunday. It doesn't really look as well developed as the GFS has it. The European seems to want to have more action going on in the west and has a pretty strong block over Greenland as well. And there's that second system that swings around for Tuesday, Wednesday, that drops into Lake Winnipeg and replaces, I'm sorry, not Lake Winnipeg, up toward Lake Superior. Before that, it's near Lake Winnipeg, but the Lake Superior, it kicks the first low out and replaces it. Now, this is for Thanksgiving Wednesday. When you have an upper flow like this, it's basically from the north and northwest. You're not going to get any kind of storm development here of consequence along the east coast. But what the European does do is that it has this trough in the central Rockies, which it drops southward into the Gulf states for the end of next week. And you've got this big blocking high up over Hudson's Bay. So it kind of sets up a very interesting looking surface at that point. But I would really just be cautious about this because of the fact that, we're 10 days out. I mean, it's got this big high to the north. It's got low pressure in the northeastern Gulf of Mexico. The fans of snowstorms, I'm sure, saw this, and they're sort of licking their chops because it would sort of set up as something with potential, but the confidence factor for me is just not there at this point. So I'm just looking at this with, you know, a little interest, but it's not really got me excited yet by any stretch of the imagination. So we'll go back to the GFS tonight and take a look at precip, and we'll get to the United States. We'll start with the snowfall for the next 10 days. And by the way, you can see here across North America, of course, Canada is snowing pretty much everywhere from coast to coast and from top to bottom. So there's no danger of that snow cover going away anytime soon. And with respect to snowfall, the snowfall forecast indicated for the U.S. over the next 10 days, it's not especially crazy. With the absence of any kind of actual storm moving across the country, you're not going to see really big amounts. Some amounts of the northern Rockies look pretty bullish. Also in the interior areas of the Northeast, there will be some lake effect out of this over this weekend, but if we wind up dealing with a slightly weaker look, the lake effect may not be as pronounced as you might think. But still, I think there should be some across parts of northwestern Pennsylvania, southwestern New York, and then on up through north central New York and into northern New England. Most of this, by the way, is probably, in terms of the snow amounts, we're probably seeing it as being a bit front-end loaded, where it's happening at the beginning of the forecast period. So you can see it here as we move through the first part of next week. You know, this is through the weekend and then into Thanksgiving week. So much of this comes in the first 6 or 7 days of the forecast period, with a little bit less in the last 3 or 4. And in terms of rainfall, you're not going to see too much, but I want to take a look at the rain in the west, because that looks especially promising for some areas. Let me get tight on the western part of the U.S. and we'll put, where is it? There it is. So here's the rainfall for the western part of the United States, and we'll run it out through next Friday. And you do have some significant amounts of 4 to 6 inches indicated for interior Northern California, on up from San Francisco northward, rainfall amounts of 2-3 inches plus, and then you get into some big amounts up as you get to coastal Oregon, and especially in coastal Washington. Looks like some of those rainfall amounts are pretty excessive with this system that's coming in off the west coast. Southeastern Canada, did I hear something for southeastern Canada? Why don't we take a look? And so here's your rainfall forecast from the GFS for the next 10 days for southeastern Canada, with 2-inch plus amounts over parts of Nova Scotia and New Brunswick, maybe 1 inch to 2 inches over Newfoundland. You can see some bigger amounts as you go up into the colder air, so we'll show you the snow. And let's see, where are you? Total snowfall. Nope, that's wrong. Now we got snowfall. Okay, so there you have it. Big amounts once you get up, Montreal into Quebec province. Not so much, lesser amounts, of course, along the coast, because until we get some kind of big storm to really impact the coastal areas, much of the snow that's going to fall is going to fall in the climatologically favored areas, which is probably just inland of the coastal plain. So I think we're going to just move along the way we have been over the last few weeks. Now that we got this blocking pattern in place, I think the big question is going to be, how long is it going to last? I didn't see anything too unusual with regards to the weather across Europe, so we'll take a look at that. And here's your snow map for Europe for the next 10 days, with much of the snow. It doesn't really seem to change too much in terms of the GFS's perspective of this lately. Pretty much shows much of southern Germany, easternmost France, and then extending on up into Austria, Hungary, and the Czech Republic, much of Poland getting some snow, but a lot of these amounts are on the light side. Probably in the elevated areas it'll be higher. Then it looks like you got a stripe of heavy snow as you move deeper into Eastern Europe and right into westernmost, westernmost Russia. Also up in England and Scotland, looks like some snows possible, maybe in the higher terrain in northern England, and of course certainly in Scotland. But we don't see any big storms. The system that's south of the Azores that looked like it was going to maybe possibly become a subtropical storm, it might still do that, but even if it does, I don't think it's going to have any unusual impact with regards to the weather going forward. So again, just to kind of repeat, I am not really overly enthused right now with regards to what I'm seeing over next week. So at the moment, Greenland blocks, North Atlantic blocks, a lot of weather folks get excited about them because they do have the potential to produce big storms. But you know what? If they are too strong, if they are not in the right geographic spot, your outcomes are different. I have to tell you, I would rather take my chances with for a snow lover, I would rather take my chances in a pattern that was far less blocky than it is now, as opposed to having a full wholesale block going on, because I just think that you have more opportunities for different kinds of snow events. Whereas, if you seem to be wanting to look for the blockbuster event, well, yeah, you're going to need a blocking pattern for that. But blockbuster events are blockbuster events because they happen every, 6, 7, 8 years. They don't happen every year. And when I'm talking about a blockbuster event, I'm talking about something like the Boxing Day blizzard, the two Christmas, the other December blizzard that occurred, I think, 2 years before, after the Boxing Day. I always confuse the Boxing Day storm with one of the other December storms, either the one that came 2 years before or 2 years after. I forget. And they all start feeling the same. The 96, the blizzard of 96 in January, the blizzard of 78. I mean, those are kind of, those are the kind of events that you see, every 7, 8 years. I would, they're fun to, if you're a snow lover, they're great, but they do cause a lot of problems, obviously, and there's a lot more. There are a lot more other ways for it to snow. So I would just rather take my chances with a pattern that's a little less blocky if I were a snow lover. So let me say a big hello to everybody. Got a nice crowd here tonight. The Epic Hunter has joined us. I think you're new to the board, so welcome aboard. And we've got Pandas, we've got Anthony Orr, we've got David Acevedo, and we've got Jason Schaefer, and Earl Warren, and Jacob Boyce, and I hope I said that right, Jacob. Aham Brahmasmi. Okay, I hope I got it right. I apologize if I did not. Anne-Marie Passaretti is here. Christopher, Doug Crum, Trishan Liu, James NASCAR, Dio, Adam Fitz, Mirtha Gunter. I haven't seen you in a while. And of course, Delvin was first and foremost tonight. And Trey is here, and so is Keith. So I think I got everybody. Okay, so if you've got any questions, I just kind of scan through here. I am Javon Johnson about snow in New York City. Right now, I'm betting against. Okay, I think Thanksgiving will be cold, and it will be windy, and it will be dry. If it plays out according to what some of the models have, both the European and the GFS have a pretty windy scenario setting up for later Wednesday and Wednesday night. So that could be, there could be some parade issues with that, with the balloons, because they don't like to send those balloons up if the wind is more than 15 or 20 miles an hour. They might have some issues with that. We'll have to investigate further when we get closer to the actual time frame. Pandas, wouldn't the flow have to be west to east and less northwest to southeast for big storms? Well, certainly the northwest flow is not a flow that you want to see. The west-east flow is going to move any weather system from west to east. You want the combination of a strong, southwest or southerly flow along the east coast with a good, solid, cold air mass built in at the bottom, at the bottom levels of the atmosphere. So you want a sort of a combination of things. You could get snow in a northwest flow. It's just that you're not going to get a big event. You'll get some kind of minor event, but you won't get a big event. David Acevedo says 2016 almost identical to the boxing blizzard. I assume, David, you're talking about the March storm, which if you were just inland of the coast, yeah, that was a lot of fun. That was quite a snowstorm for areas barely inland of the coast and northward, and especially through upstate New York, where some places got, you know, record 24-hour snowfalls amounts and record total snowfall amounts in the 30 to 40 inch range. Even more in some places where they get than they get with lake effect. Anthony Orr, yes, you are correct. Emotional roller coaster. That's why I don't want to spend too much. You know, there's always, you know, the emphasis on these surface map plots that these models do every 6 hours. You know, people throw them out there and there's no context given. You have to give context to this stuff, otherwise it's a waste of time. Anybody can look at a map. We all can do this. Anyone can look at a map and say, you know, well, this model shows such and such, but if you don't give it context in terms of what it means and what is actually going on in the upper atmosphere, it's a waste of time. 6 hours later, especially, you know, deeper in the long range, 6 hours later, you're going to have an entirely different look. And in fact, you know, today's model runs kind of shifted the look around a little bit for later next week, to one that looks basically cold and dry. So, you know, you have to be really careful with this sort of stuff. And I guarantee you the European, with what it did today, and I did already see, you know, people posting about, you know, the look at the end of the period of the European is something that's very exciting for snow lovers. Yeah, it is, if it looks like that. And that's the thing. We don't even know if it's really going to look like that. The blocking pattern that we have suggests that it's a possibility, okay? Because when you have blocks, you can wind up with the surface looking the way the European has, but there's just too many variables going on. Too many things going on upstream, too many things going on in the west, and we really, you know, you just can't, you just can't jump on this stuff, you know, reflexively at all. It's an exercise in futility, and then 6 hours from now you'll go from being, you know, if you're looking for a snowstorm, you're going to go from being totally elated to absolutely depressed. Let's see. Fabian Bartalos, you have any QBO readout data still trending to below -20? I have not really paid too close attention to that particular index. I'm still trying to familiarize myself with that and how it works. I do understand, however, that, you know, it is continuing to trend negative, which would be bullish for, you know, a cold and snowy winter, but I don't have a specific number with regards to what the index is reading. Can lake effect happen out of smallish lakes? Well, I have to tell you, I mean, I live on Long Island, and we actually get sometimes under certain scenarios very deep, if we have a very deep Arctic air mass and a wind off Long Island Sound, which is only, you know, a handful of miles wide. And when I say a handful, it's probably about, you know, depending on where, you know, where you are, it could be anywhere from, you know, half a dozen miles wide to a dozen miles wide, or a bit more. Now, I live 19 miles south of Bridgeport, so, you know, even though it's a relatively small body of water, we have had instances there where we get, you know, deep in an Arctic air mass and a northerly wind coming in across the Sound, and it has produced sound effect snows. Not much, maybe enough to whiten the ground. I can remember a few times where we actually had enough to leave about an inch or so in some places, perhaps a little bit more, but that would be the extent of it. But, you know, sometimes you do get, you know, if you do, there's some awfully strange small-scale factors in microclimates that occur, and you don't get to see them unless you're really, really paying attention. Aerolore Productions. Welcome, by the way. I'm new here watching from Waterloo, Ontario. I read online that lake effect snow bands only affect Waterloo sometimes. Sometimes the band just ends short of Kitchener. The strength is based on... Well, I'm not familiar with the geography, you know, the overall geography of where you are, but I would say that the direction of the wind is going to play is the factor with regards to the lake effect. So you're going to get I'd have to look and see on a map. I'll try and give it a look and answer your question a bit better maybe tomorrow if you do come on and remind me. But it's really, you're only going to get the lake effect when you have a favorable wind, and that wind is going to probably be from the direction that it takes the longest trajectory over the lake water, because that would pick up moisture, the maximum amount of moisture, and put it on your shores. So I'm thinking for you, since you're on the north side of Lake Ontario, you're probably going to want some sort of a south wind or a southwest wind. I'm guessing off the top of my head. I don't know for sure, but it will definitely have to. It would probably come with that kind of component. If you're maybe on the if you're on the northwestern shore, perhaps more of an east wind or an east-northeast wind. I'm going to look on a map and take a look at and see what I come up with. Okay, but it would be whatever wind direction that has the longest trajectory over the water would give you the maximum amount of lake effect. Let's see. And yes, Carl White, you're absolutely right. Cape Cod gets ocean effect snow, sometimes 6 inches or more. I've seen it. I think we had an ocean effect snow in Cape Cod last winter in February, if I recall. Does eastern Michigan ever get lake effect? I think only, yeah, I would imagine if you get a northeast wind coming in off of Lake Huron, you should be able to get, in northeastern Michigan anyway. I don't know that you know, there's probably not that much that goes on in southeastern Michigan because you don't have a whole lot of lake exposure there. But certainly in in eastern Michigan, if you've got a northeast wind, you're going to get some lake-enhanced snows. Again, I'd have to really, you know, I don't pay a whole lot. Northwest wind from Lake Huron for I'm just trying to visualize, you know, how Lake Huron and where Detroit is juxtaposed. I got to go look. Okay, that's not my regular geography, so I got to look to see what the deal is there. Okay, folks, it's been a great evening of chatting and talking. I've really enjoyed it. I'll probably do a Facebook Live in a couple of hours, so if you're on my Facebook, no guarantees, by the way. I say that sometimes, and then when the time comes rolling around, I get a little tired. I did a talk this morning, which I really enjoyed, but it's made for a very long day, so I'm not 100% sure whether I'll do the Facebook Live or not. And I've been doing it, last night I did one with my colleague Joe Rayo, so we did the Joe and Joe show, which I always like to do. So anyway, good for you, Michael Zimmerman. You took off 50 pounds. I need to take off at least 20 on my for myself here. Okay, Epic Hunter, I don't know what, you know, with respect to the winter and the winter forecast, I really don't do winter forecasts or long-range forecasts. I'm more of a short-range kind of guy, so as I really don't have a good feel for what the long-range, you know, and forecasting it. You know, I admit that openly, but I will say that at least based on the pattern that we have right now, it looks like that the winter is going to start off on a colder than average note, and for interior upstate New York, that might mean the lake effect machine will be working overtime. Whether that pattern holds beyond the early part or the middle part of December, it remains to be seen. Hi back to Ruru25. Just want to make sure I say hi. And Awesome Gamer, I haven't seen you around for a while. Good to see you here. But it's time for me to say goodbye. So if you're just getting on the live stream late, not to worry. You can replay the live stream, I think, up to about 4 hours. And, of course, it does load in the video library. You can catch me on Facebook, meteorologist Joe Cioffi. And, of course, latest posts on the website, meteorologistjoecioffi.com. Have a great rest of your Tuesday, and we will see you tomorrow.